10 people who tried to warn us about total disasters. It's sad that, sometimes, because if what someone's saying is going against like the majority, they're often silenced, ignored, pushed aside. And then, when it turns out that the person was right, you'll see people like, oh, he was right all along, we should have listened to him. Like, why does it take sometimes total catastrophes for us to listen to the voice that's going against the majority? I don't know why, because it happens over and over again. Like, I guarantee there's probably something happening right now that there is someone somewhere that's like screaming at the top of their lungs saying, no, we shouldn't be doing this, but we're heading straight in that direction anyway.
Cold for several days, and it was getting colder.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're looking at individuals who correctly forecasted catastrophic events.
He was among the first people to see the bin Laden threat.
Stanley Adams, the Titanic sinking. The fate of the RMS Titanic seemed all but impossible. After all, the massive British ocean liner had garnered a reputation as being unsinkable, but it could not withstand the impact of the iceberg it hit.
Is there anyone there?
Yes, what do you see?
Iceberg, right ahead!
Thank you.
Hours before this collision, Stanley Adams, the wireless operator of another ship, the SS Mesaba, messaged the crew, warning of, quote, heavy pack ice and greater number large icebergs in the Atlantic Ocean. But while Titanic wireless operator Jack Phillips received and acknowledged the message, it never made it to the bridge.
Why not?
Thanks. Once Phillips had replied to Adams's message, there was no communication between the two ships for around 10 minutes.
However, Captain Edward Smith had ignored prior caution about the ice. Had he heeded these warnings, the untimely deaths of him and more than 1,000 other people on board could have been prevented.
1,000.
Captain, sir!
Harry
Disaster.
Markopolos.
It's just like, man, why didn't he listen? Why? Like, I can't understand why you wouldn't listen. Pride? Ego? I didn't realize it was 1,000 people. Like, I remember watching the movie when I was a kid, like a really young kid, probably too young, but 1,000, that is a lot of people.
The Bernie Madoff Ponzi scheme. Bernie Madoff ran an investment firm that swindled roughly $65 billion from clients who had been led to believe he was helping them grow their nest eggs through shrewd financial management.
$65 billion. That is an insane amount of money.
With promised returns of around 18%, entire families jumped in.
Instead, he was depositing all of his clients' money in a separate bank account rather than investing it, while having employees fabricate trade reports in a giant version of a Ponzi scheme.
This guy was just as calm as a cucumber. I didn't see any sign, and usually, that should have been sort of a sign to me in retrospect, too.
In 1999, financial analyst Harry Markopolos found very strong evidence of fraud, arguing it was mathematically impossible for his reported gains to be legitimate.
Harry started engineering it, looking at it, and dissecting the returns, and he's, after 4 hours of work or so, came up and said, Frank, this is a Ponzi scheme.
From 2000 to 2005, he tried to warn the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission of Madoff's
5 years he tried warning them and they didn't listen. 5 years?
deception. While Madoff eventually admitted to his con in 2008, he could have been stopped much sooner had Markopolos been listened to.
Nothing phases me. After Madoff, nothing ever will. Because I saw the absolute worst part of humanity at that case.
Li Wenliang.
It's pretty obvious to me why they didn't listen to him. Those people were probably making money off Bernie Madoff. Like, why else wouldn't they? 5 years of someone just saying without a doubt, this is fake, this is a Ponzi scheme, he's a fraudster. Somebody at the SEC should have been fired. At least one person, because it was so that amount of money. You could say that he made off with a lot of money. But
COVID-19. On December 30th, 2019, the Centers for Disease Prevention and Control in Wuhan, China sent out warnings to all area hospitals about a mysterious trend of what they claimed was pneumonia.
According to authorities, the number of cases has increased to 44, with 11 of them in serious condition.
However, Li Wenliang, an ophthalmologist at the Central Hospital of Wuhan, received a report mentioning, quote, SARS coronavirus. Lee shared this information in a private WeChat group with fellow medical school alumni.
Lee sent a group message saying that a test result from a patient quarantined at the hospital where he worked showed a patient had a coronavirus.
Though he specifically asked for the information to not be shared outside of the group, it soon spread far and wide. He was reprimanded by his employers and was forced into signing a letter of admonition, which he later posted to social media.
Chinese state media.
But why? Why? Like, if they listened, they could have stopped, millions. I don't know how many people ended up dying because of it, but it was a lot. I think it was worldwide. It has to be millions, no?
Media first reported that Lee was one of several whistleblowers silenced by police. Calls for Lee and the others to be vindicated grew online.
The following month, Lee contracted COVID-19 from a patient, and on February 7th, 2020, he passed away at age 34.
Way.
Ferdinand
34. I genuinely think that, do you agree that the people who keep, silencing these whistleblowers, they should be held, personally responsible? Because I don't know why you would do that, just to stop people from panicking, but people end up panicking anyway.
Fush, World War II. The global conflict lasting from 1914 until 1918 was originally commonly referred to as the Great War and the war to end all wars.
The man who endured the war at its worst was everlastingly differentiated from everyone, except his fellow soldiers.
This, of course, was not the case, as World War II broke out a little over 2 decades later. One person who could see it coming was Ferdinand Foch, a French general who served as the Western Front's supreme Allied commander during World War I. Foch was involved in the Treaty of Versailles, which he believed should have been much harsher on Germany.
The German army was restricted to only 100,000 men. The Navy could now only have 6 battleships and no submarines.
He's also been alleged to have referred to it as, quote, an armistice for 20 years, which essentially was proven true. Foch passed away in 1929, meaning he didn't live to see his post-war concerns realized.
Oh, man.
Ivar von Heerden.
That's a big one. In terms of, worldwide, fatality rates, this has to be the biggest one so far, and potentially the biggest one on this list, because, how many people died as a result of that war? It's got to be at least 10 million, right? At least.
Hurricane Katrina. In August 2005, Hurricane Katrina swept through the southern United States, but by far the most devastation happened to the city of New Orleans, which suffered catastrophic flooding when the levees built to prevent that were destroyed by the storm.
The reason why the looters got out of control? Because we had most of our resources saving people, thousands of people.
One person who could see this coming was Ivar von Heerden, then deputy director of the Louisiana State University Hurricane Center.
Now, this is a slide from 1999 when we first got started. This is what we were predicting. This is what we were trying to sell. That a storm such as Katrina would be a catastrophe.
4 years before Katrina hit, von Heerden had been sounding alarm bells about the impact.
Gosh, how high is this water? It's hard to say because I can't see beneath, the surface, but it's got to be at least a few feet, hasn't it?
Of a potential storm and how the levees were not up to par, blaming the federal government for their lack of concern. Von Heerden later published a book about how his worst suspicions were realized, titled The Storm.
That this is a major American city, protected by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, supposed to be state-of-the-art engineering, and it failed so dismally.
Dan Applegate, Turkish Airlines Flight 981 crash.
I think some areas still haven't recovered from Katrina, have they? Completely recovered. And it's been, 20 years?
When it comes to aviation, safety is everything. And that doesn't just go for the people flying the plane. On March 3, 1974, Turkish Airlines Flight 981 departed from Istanbul Yeşilköy Airport, headed to London Heathrow Airport. An intermediate stop was made at Paris's Orly Airport.
Now, when they arrived to Paris, 50 of the passengers disembarked the aircraft, and they boarded another 216 passengers.
Upon its second takeoff, the rear left cargo door blew off, starting a chain reaction that resulted in the plane crashing into the Hermenonville forest, killing all 346 people on board.
Wow. It slams into the ground with almost 800 kilometers per hour. Because of that speed and the force of the impact, the aircraft is shattered into thousands of small fragments, and there's no fire breaking out just because of the sheer force of the impact.
The door's design flaw made it appear secure even when improperly locked. The baggage handler, unaware they needed to inspect the latches, failed to do so.
And he also said that he hadn't checked the little verification window that had been installed. And the reason for that was that no one had actually instructed him on why he should be doing it. He didn't know what to look for. He had only seen other people do it.
2 years earlier, Convair engineer Dan Applegate had warned that such a failure was inevitable without critical design upgrades. Sadly, he was right.
The new design made sure that the mechanism wouldn't stop until the latches were in their perfectly close position.
Jan Hatzius.
God, it's crazy how one small mistake, or not really a mistake, but like it is a mistake, not checking the latch caused that to happen. 300 people. All he had to do was check the door to see if it was secured. That's nuts. If you were like a family member or like, somebody on that plane you loved, cared about, whatever, it would be so hard to get over that. It really would. All he had to do was check the door.
The 2007-2008 financial crisis. A whole host of combined issues, from predatory lending to lack of proper oversight, led to the worst global financial crisis since the Great Depression.
All transactions came to a halt, and there are thousands and thousands and thousands of transactions.
The hedge funds who had assets with Lehman in London discovered overnight, to their complete horror, that they couldn't get those assets back.
In 2007, Jan Hatzius, the chief economist of Goldman Sachs, said a full-blown recession was unlikely. However, he argued it was still possible, pointing to a variety of potential factors. Indeed, the economy's downward slide persisted, and in January 2008, Goldman Sachs predicted a recession was coming.
The red flag is basically the increase in the unemployment rate, which now has totals about a third of a percentage point on a 3-month average basis.
Though he was by no means the only economist forecasting a recession, Hatzius's predictions were the most accurate. Though Hatzius's warnings alone wouldn't be enough to prevent the economic collapse experienced around the world, they serve as an important reminder as to the crucial importance of economists.
We can have a lasting economic recovery in the sense that the economy grows through 2010. We expect it to grow, but we don't expect it to grow that quickly.
Nikola Tesla.
I do feel like financial markets, things like that should be regulated more, just because disasters like that could probably be avoided if, that predatory lending wasn't allowed. But at the same time, the profits generated from that lending are probably what's going into a lot of pension pots and things like that. So I don't think we'll ever see, financial markets and things like that, properly like regulated and checks and balances put there. Because, people like making money. Or what do you think? Should they be regulated, or should they just be left to, do whatever they can to make as much money as possible? Because if you let them do that, another recession is inevitable for sure. Like, you'll just keep seeing bubbles, and then they'll just inevitably like pop.
Fossil fuel risks. By far the most famous individual on this list, Nikola Tesla is one of the most influential minds of his era and beyond.
He experimented with a system of wireless lighting, giving several public demonstrations.
In addition to receiving more than 200 patents for his inventions, Tesla also had very shrewd insights about the long-term risks of burning fossil fuels for energy. These were non-renewable resources that would eventually run out, even if it wasn't in his lifetime. In 1915, Tesla wrote it would need to be curbed, quote, in the interest of coming generations, advocating instead for a switch to renewable energy sources, particularly solar power.
Electrons are the only moving parts in a solar cell, and they all go back where they came from. There's nothing to get worn out or used up.
Unfortunately, Tesla's warnings were not heeded. Had he been listened to, there's no telling how much better off the global environment would be thanks to renewable energy. Roger Beaujolais.
Mad how he was so far ahead of his time. He could see it coming from like miles away. I mean, we are sort of heading, I think there's a lot of efforts with EVs and things like that. We could probably do more though.
The Challenger disaster. On the morning of January 28, 1986, millions of Americans turned on their TVs to watch the Space Shuttle Challenger take off. What should have been a day of triumph became one of tragedy when the vessel broke apart 73 seconds after launch, resulting in the deaths of all 7 crew members.
When we first saw the explosion, we didn't know exactly what had happened. And then we realized, I think we were trying to talk ourselves out of it really being the disaster that it was.
In the months ahead of the launch, Roger Beaujolais, a mechanical engineer whose company, Morton Thiokol, was involved in the launch, argued that the cold weather conditions of the January launch would likely lead to the failure of crucial O-rings, and subsequently, the whole vessel.
That's when Roger Beaujolais got very vocal about, as far as he was concerned, if you look at those, it's the influence of temperature.
But the dire warnings of Beaujolais and others to cancel the launch were ignored, and his grim predictions sadly came to realization.
This was a meeting where the determination was to launch, and it was up to us to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that it was not safe to do so.
Before we continue,
that one's insane. All they had to do is delay it. Just like, you're not stopping it, you're just delaying it by a few weeks, a few months. You know, there was a teacher, I think, on board, like with her school kids watching, the whole school watching, the whole country. And then to see that happen live and to know that there's just no chance that they survived.
Continue. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. John P. O'Neill, the September 11th attacks. The attacks of September 11th, 2001 sent shockwaves throughout the world.
We heard a big bang, and then we saw smoke coming out, and everybody started running out, and we saw the plane on the other side of the building.
It may have seemed like it came out of nowhere, but John Patrick O'Neill certainly saw it coming. The FBI agent specialized in counterterrorism and helped with the apprehension of the mastermind of the 1993 World Trade Center bombing.
One of the agents asked me if he could take the blindfold off Yusuf, and I said, sure, go right ahead. And it was ironic because as he finally focused his eyes, we were right adjacent to the World Trade Center. And he kind of focused in on that. And of course, one of the agents sitting next to him gave him a little bit of a nudge and said, you see, it still stands.
He would later zero in on the activities of Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda.
My dad had a lot of video of Osama bin Laden. Whatever was out there was actually in his apartment. He studied him several times, watched the videos I know several times.
But his warnings of a potential attack on U.S. soil were ignored, resulting in his leaving the FBI. On August 23, 2001, O'Neill started a new job as chief of security at the World Trade Center, and he tragically lost his life in the attacks the following month. Do you remember where you were when any of these disasters were first reported? Let us know in the comments.
And he said, I sense a shift, and I think things are going to happen. And I said, when? He said, I don't know, but soon.
That last one is brutal. Like, just, you know, he knew something was going to happen. He loses his job. He leaves his job. His new job puts him in the place that gets attacked, and then he dies. Like, that has just got to be so hard to take for his family. You know, like, they must just be thinking, why didn't you listen? Why didn't you listen to us, to me, to him? Insane. Like, I get it. Nobody's perfect. You know, everybody makes mistakes and stuff. But I think when there's massive potential consequences, I do think we should probably take a bit more of a cautious approach. What do you think? Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.